But I'm going to give you another example, which for anyone in South Africa, you will recognize. And that is of the retail giant Edgars. And this is an advert they had out recently. You had a bad day, people forgot we existed. Now, when I was growing up, Edgars was when you grow up, you get your first Edgars account and you get your first card, and then you know that you're a grown up because you got your Edgars credit card. It wasn't just a department store. It was a place that we went to, that we hung out at. It did financial products and funeral plans. It had everything that you need, personal and makeup and homeware. And, it was just everything you could find in Edgars. And any big stall or a mall that you went to, they had an Edgars. So it was part of our culture growing up. But there was a problem that Edgars had, is that their sales were declining. Their large flagship stores were increasingly empty. And for any of the South Africans there, think back to, a couple of years ago, before COVID, if you ever went into Edgars, I would have loved to work out who did the salespeople training there, because it was really good. You would walk in and there would be salespeople around. They'd be very friendly and they want to help you and make sure that everything you need is there. And they could do that. You could have 3 or 4 salespeople helping you because there were only a handful of people in the store. The sales training was really good, but it wasn't answering the problem. And maybe they were just playing around at the top there, but it wasn't addressing the real issue. Their debt was mounting, their malls had less foot traffic, and the stores were increasingly more expensive to operate. This became a really serious problem. And then COVID came and just absolutely escalated the crisis. So when we look at the system beneath it that created these results, part of the system were these huge rental commitments in the premium malls and the big malls. Their large format department store era was built literally for another era, like for the 80s and 90s. They had high debt servicing costs. They had very complex inventory. If you went into an Edgars store, you could find all these other brands with like these little mini shops within a brand. And there were like technical problems as well about slow decision making and being unable to respond to the competition from online retailers and from fast fashion. And all of that started to create these serious problems. Beneath the system was the worldview that made sense back in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, when Saturday morning meant going into town and going to visit Edgars. Having a big store was prestigious for the Edgars brand. Department stores were a destination, a place that you went to and you met up with people. And customers enjoyed browsing around through the different items in the store. And that was the worldview they had. And part of it was based on this myth of Edgars being the part of the fabric of South African life. Becoming an adult, getting your first card. It was a big event. My mom took me, we celebrated. Part of the myth is that retail is inevitable and essential and cannot be replaced with anything else. It's a myth that we all believed. And the danger of those powerful myths is that organizations start to believe that what they have created is permanent and inevitable and cannot be challenged. And that was the problem. So, whoopsie, we got to go back one. There we go. So when COVID hit, everything for Edgars really came to a crisis. And I remember listening to a recording of a radio interview with the CEO. And he was being interviewed by Bruce Whitfield, I think, on The Money Show. And the CEO was talking about, very frankly, because this was not an Edcon problem. This was a South African problem, that Edgars didn't have enough money. They had enough money probably to pay salaries this month, but now we were going into lockdown and people weren't buying from Edgars, and they already had problems and they didn't have money to service their debts. And the CEO is getting choked up. He's getting emotional on radio in front of the entire country. And it was really a pivotal moment. And I imagine this man had grown up with the myth of Edgars. He wasn't much older than me. So, he would have grown up with that as being part of his background in his own life. And he must have been so proud when he finally got to that position of CEO. And now he's facing this situation that is really traumatic for so many people. And it was like nobody was looking at Edgars going, oh, look at all the things you did wrong. It was like everybody was feeling that kind of shared pain of what that company was going through. So they needed to change things. And they could only change it by starting right down with the myths and metaphors. So a new company came along and bought them, retailability, and they challenged a whole lot of things. And I think part of it is because they came in with a fresh mindset. They didn't bring in all those inherited values and myths and things. And they said, what is real here that we can make work? And what do we get rid of? What do we let go of? So the old myth was Edgars must be the biggest department store. Apart from a grocery store, Edgars was always the largest store in a shopping mall. The new myth was Edgars must remain relevant for its customers. That's the story we're going to tell. That's what we're going to talk about. Edgars is relevant, not Edgars is biggest, not Edgars is proud. Edgars is relevant to what our needs are. So once they change that little bit, then they could start to change the worldview. The old worldview was success comes from scale, from being large. The new worldview is success comes from efficiency, flexibility, and customer relevance. That's how we're going to measure it. That's what the worldview is. That's what we're operating in a world that is online and everything is happening so quickly. We need efficiency, flexibility, and being relevant. And so they created new systems. They closed underperforming stores. They reduced their store footprints in the shopping malls. They renegotiated their leases and rental exposure. They simplified their operations. They got rid of a whole lot of elements to the business that were there for ego, but didn't actually add to the bottom line. They focused on profitable locations. They pulled all of that together and they created better systems. And those better systems, inevitably, without any effort after you created the system, create new, better results. And the visible results today is that Edgars is now opening new stores again. Not huge, massive stores, but really tight, relevant stores that are profitable, that are creating renewed confidence in the shopping malls and with consumers. And when consumers walk in now, when a customer walks in, there's a new attractive energy and vibe in the Edgars store that has been missing for a very long time. So for me, I just find that to be a really powerful illustration of how we can use this causal layered analysis. And again, I invite you, sketch that out. Anytime that you're stuck thinking, I'm not liking the results here, let's go down and explore what is beneath. And as you go down, you'll be able to find those other layers. This is not the easiest exercise, and this can be challenging. When you start to get to worldviews and myths and metaphors, it's literally about our identity, how we see ourselves. And anybody who's had any challenge their identity, who've had to, rework things, especially post-COVID, you'll know that that is quite challenging. So just give yourself a good dose of grace if you are working through that. But in terms of making real change, in terms of shaping things for the future, there's nothing better than that particular model, causal layered analysis. So yes, we can really shape things for the future.